You don't need to be whole, you just need to be real. I once sat beside an old woman who had just dropped her teacup. She flustered, apologized, and said, "I'm so clumsy now. I'm old, nothing about me is whole anymore." I didn't say anything. I just watched the trail of spilled tea spread across the table and quietly thought, some things only begin to look beautiful after they're no longer perfect. We grow up dreaming of wholeness, a whole family, a whole body, a flawless reputation, a complete love, an unbroken memory. But one day we're faced with a quieter truth. Life was never made to be whole. It was made to become. And to take form, it must first break. You don't need to be whole to be loved. You don't need to be whole to be worthy of life. You don't need to be whole to be called a good person. You don't need to be whole to leave this life in peace. You just need to be real. Real like a wrinkle you don't bother to hide. Real like a tear that falls without needing to be wiped away. Real like a breath in the middle of the night when you whisper, "I'm still alive." In Buddhism, the word mindfulness doesn't mean something profound. It simply means to be here without pretending, without hiding, without running. Christianity says, "The truth shall set you free," but that truth isn't something outside you. It is the honesty within the moment you stop trying to become someone else and start showing up as yourself. Taoism asks nothing of you. It simply whispers, to not compete is to be strong. To not display is to be deep. To not be full is to touch the sky. You don't need answers for everything. You don't need to play the perfect father, the perfect grandmother, the flawless friend. You just need the courage to be you. To sit alone in the quiet of your room, not waiting for anyone to call, not hoping for praise, just breathing and finding that your heart is no longer hollow. I once listened to an old man speak softly during a meditation session. I spent most of my life trying to be loved. But today I just want to be me. Not loved, just real. Being real is not confessing your flaws to the world. It is holding yourself gently even when you can't forgive yourself yet. You've lived long enough to know this. Those who try hardest to prove they've never broken are often the ones hurting the most. But the one who dares to say, "I have broken before," that is the one who is becoming strongest of all. There is no perfect soul. Only the soul brave enough to return to its true shape. Even if it's old, even if it's wrinkled, even if it's soft and flawed, it still shines. And if you've made it this far reading these final words, then perhaps you're already brave enough to see yourself, not through a mirror, but through the light inside you. And if you remember nothing else from this journey, just remember this as a final whisper, a last blessing. You are not broken. You were never broken. You are simply becoming more complete, more gentle, more real after everything that once felt shattered. You were never broken. You are simply becoming. You are not broken. You never were. You're simply returning to the truest shape of who you've always been. I know these words may sound too gentle for a heart that's weathered too many storms. Because how can you believe you're becoming whole when it takes you 3 full minutes just to rise from bed in the morning? How do you still feel valuable when your children no longer look at you the way they used to? How can you call this healing when your hands tremble trying to button a tiny shirt? Or when you stare at an old photograph and can't quite remember who's smiling back? How do you convince yourself you're not falling apart when the phone rings less and less and no one asks anymore? How are you really? I understand, I truly do, because sometimes even I doubt the things I've come to believe. Even after saying them out loud, I've sat alone in the dark and asked myself, does that light inside really exist, or is it something we made up just to survive? But then in the quietest moments, like when the afternoon sun spills gently across your hands, or when an old song drifts in through a dusty radio, there it is again, that quiet knowing no words can quite reach. Wholeness is not something you achieve. It's something that's always been there waiting for you to return. Once I met a woman during a healing meditation circle. Her name was Elaine. She was 79. Her husband had passed away 4 months earlier after 52 years of marriage. She didn't cry. She just sat, hands folded in her lap, still, steady. When it was her turn to speak, she said one sentence. "I don't know who I am now that I'm not his wife." The room fell completely silent. No one rushed to fill it. And then, almost like a breath fading into dusk, she whispered, "But maybe, and this is the first time I get to find out." And all of us knew in that moment this wasn't falling apart. This was the first step toward becoming. Wholeness isn't going back to who you were. It's slowly becoming who you were meant to be. Not the mother who held everything together. Not the grandfather who never asked for help. Not the friend who smiled through the pain. But you, with slower legs, with a voice that sometimes shakes, with a history full of cracks but a heart still warm enough to love a flower, a sunset, a wordless song. So if tonight you feel like you're breaking, let yourself break, but break inward. Fall into the soft arms of your own tenderness. Cry, breathe, curl up into the pillow and say, "I'm still here," because that's the moment you stop pretending. And when you stop pretending, that's when you finally begin to become yourself. The things we keep hidden. Not everyone who grows old is tired, but everyone who is tired has hidden too much for too long. It was a regular Monday morning. The sun was gentle. The breeze touched the air like a quiet hand. Inside the community room, 12 older adults sat in a circle, cream-colored plastic chairs, a low table in the center, a kettle of herbal tea releasing soft steam. The session that day was led by Marie, a mental health care specialist. Patient, quiet. All she asked was simple. Share one thing you've never said out loud. Just one. You don't have to explain why. Evelyn spoke first. She was 76. Her hair the color of ash, always pinned neatly behind her neck. She wore a thick cardigan even though it wasn't cold, as if she always felt the need to keep something covered. "There's something I've never told anyone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the last 3 years, I've been forgetting my grandson's name." No one laughed, no one gasped. Just silence, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for her to finally exhale. At first I was just confused, then I was scared. Every time he calls out, "Grandma, it's me, Mason." I pretend I remember. I smile, I nod, I hug him tight, but inside it's a slippery blank, and I feel like I'm disappearing. A tear fell onto her hand, and I keep telling myself, "Be strong. Don't let anyone know. Don't make him worry. Don't become a burden." She paused. "But today, I just want to be a grandmother who forgets her grandson's name. Not because I want to, but because I just don't remember." Something in the room broke. Not pain, but the silence that had become a second skin for everyone there. David, 81, sitting beside her, gently nodded. "I've been there." Once I looked into the mirror and couldn't remember what day it was. He didn't say more. Just reached for her hand, and his eyes spoke the rest. We don't just hide the things we're ashamed of. We hide the things that make us human. One forgotten name. One moment sitting on the floor because of sudden dizziness. One missed word from a grandchild. 1 hour staring at the phone, not remembering how to make a call. And with each moment, instead of being held, instead of being accepted, we hide. And the more we hide, the more alone we feel. The more alone we feel, the more we start believing that we are something broken, something wrong, something that must be fixed. And once sat in a circle like that, not to lead, not to teach, but to listen. And he remembers so clearly. Older people aren't afraid of aging. They're afraid of no longer being allowed to be themselves. There was a man there named George, 84. He didn't speak all session. But as he was leaving, he paused at the doorway and said, "You know, I used to be a literature teacher, taught for decades, and yesterday I wrote the wrong name on my own medical form." Am remembers his eyes. Not ashamed, but the eyes of someone who had just noticed a crack in the foundation he always thought was unshakable. We grow up in a world that celebrates strength. Those with good memory are praised. Those who stay independent are admired. Those who never complain called role models. But no one ever asks, what about those who are forgetting? What about those who need help? What about those who can no longer pretend? Do they still deserve love? Are they still human? You don't have to remember everything to be worthy. You don't have to hide your confusion to be loved. You just need the courage to stop hiding from yourself. Am believes, even when memory fades, the light inside you remains. What we hide is where healing begins. That day in a quiet Monday therapy group, there was one woman no one expected to speak. Her name was Lorraine, 73. Short white hair, a strong, steady frame. The way she sat made it clear she had been through a lot, but never let anyone see. She was usually the one who made people laugh, brewed the tea, shared funny stories from the past, always had a smile ready. But that day when the room went still, she set her teacup down and took a long breath. "No one knows this," she said, her voice scratchy as if caught on something inside. 3 years ago, I sat in my bathroom with a bottle of sleeping pills and thought, would anyone even notice if I disappeared? No one moved. I didn't do it, she continued, because my grandson knocked on the door and said, "Grandma, I need help with my homework." I put the cap back on, opened the door, and kept going. But after that, I stopped being me. I became a version of myself, the smiling old lady who said all the right things at the right time. And every night I'd just sit there breathing, but never really lighter. Mom has heard stories like this many times, because the strongest people are often the ones who've mastered hiding their pain. Not because they're dishonest, but because life never taught them how to share. It only taught them how to endure. Endure being left, endure being misunderstood, endure being unheard. Lorraine bowed her head. A single tear slipped down. No one rushed toward her, no one wrapped her in a hug. They just stayed, fully present, and sometimes that's enough. To simply have someone witness your truth can be the start of a brand new life. Am believes every one of us has a locked room inside, filled with things we've never told anyone. Quiet shame, unspoken mistakes, wounds we pretend we've healed when really, we've just avoided them. So we lock that door, we smile, we stay busy, we help others so we don't have to face what's hidden inside. Until one day old age quietly opens the door without asking. Aging isn't decay, it's revelation. No more makeup, no more roles, no more need to prove anything. Just you and you. So what do we do when we finally meet ourselves? Keep hiding, or begin to look back with softer eyes. I once met a man named Leonard at a nursing home in North Carolina. He had deep brown eyes like wet soil after rain, quiet, full of memory. When asked, "What do you regret most in life?" he waited a long time, then answered, "I regret never letting anyone see how sad I was. I always smiled, always held it together, always knew the answers. But really, I was just a scared little boy inside, afraid I'd never be enough to be loved." The truth isn't a burden, it's a key. And when you dare to unlock it, you no longer live inside a prison you built yourself. You weren't born to play a role forever. You don't have to be the perfect mother, or the father who always knows best, or the grandparent who's always upbeat. You only need to be real, even if that means saying, "Honey, today I feel fragile. I don't remember your name, but I remember how warm you made me feel." Friend, there was a time I didn't want to be here either. That's not weakness. That is quiet courage. The kind that breaks through every mask to finally live as yourself. When the session ended, Lorraine stood up and smiled at the group. Not a bright, cheerful smile, not one meant to comfort others, but the kind of smile you wear after shedding an old, heavy skin. Am believes healing begins the moment you stop hiding from your pain. Not to be pitied, not to be praised, but simply to remind yourself, I'm still here, and everything I once tried to hide I now love enough to keep close, because it is all a part of me. And if you're still reading these words, maybe you're ready to breathe easier too. The price of perfection. To keep a steady image, he traded away the softest parts of himself. His name was Marcus D. Harlan. He was 82, lived alone in a small apartment organized like a retirement office. Everything in his home was in perfect order, photos aligned, not a single paper out of place. His teacup always resting exactly at a 90-degree angle on its coaster. Wenham came to visit not as a reporter, not as a nurse, but simply as someone invited to listen. Marcus began with one sentence. I'm a good man. He said it like he was reciting a report he'd memorized long ago. And in his eyes, what flickered wasn't pride. It was the fear of being doubted. Marcus used to be a CEO at an engineering firm. He lived a life of order and discipline, never late, never forgot his wife's birthday, never raised a hand to his child, never cried in front of anyone. He said all the right things, did all the right things. He was called the ideal man for years, until one day he collapsed in the bathroom while getting ready for a retirement board meeting. No pain, no dizziness, he said, just I couldn't stand up. And the part that unsettled him most wasn't his body. It was his first thought. If I call someone for help, they'll see I'm weak. He lay there, on the cold tile floor, staring at the ceiling as if seeing it for the first time from below. That was when I realized I've spent my whole life holding up an image of strength, so much so. I no longer knew how to be vulnerable safely. Am didn't interrupt, he just listened. Marcus continued. I used to think being a good man meant never making anyone worry, never complaining, never asking for help, always standing strong. But no one ever told me good men are allowed to lean, to be tired, to say I'm not okay. Perfection isn't always a virtue. Sometimes it's a shell we build because we don't believe we'd still be loved if we let people see the truth underneath. Marcus said he never once shared his fears with his wife. Not about losing his job, not about aging, not about illness. She thought I was always fine, because I made her believe that. When she died suddenly of a heart attack, he didn't cry. He cleaned the room, put away her hairbrush, folded the bedding just right. 3 days after the funeral, he wrote thank you letters to everyone who attended. Perfect penmanship, blue ink, not a smudge in sight. Asked him softly, when was the last time you cried? Marcus went quiet for a long time. Then he said, when I was a child, I spilled a glass of milk and my father scolded me. That day I learned people leave when you're weak, so he built an entire life around strength, a fortress, a perfect image. And at 82, when there was no one left to perform for, he finally saw it. I've lived like a building, with no one inside. Perfection without truth becomes a prison, not one with bars, but one you carry with you every day. I once heard a Taoist saying, to be truly full, you must be willing to be empty. To go deep, you must not show off. To be strong, you must stop forcing. Marcus didn't need someone to fix him. He just needed someone to see him beneath the layers of polished strength. Not as Mr. Marcus, the successful man, but as Marcus, a man who tried his best, and now deserves to rest, deserves to soften, deserves to be free from the image he worked so hard to maintain. Let go of the image, return to yourself. Wholeness isn't about being unbroken. It's about learning to live with your cracks without shame. That day, after a long, quiet conversation, Marcus stood up and slowly made 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Am, still placed at a perfect 90-degree angle, but this time, he smiled. I've never let anyone make tea for me, he said. It always had to be me, because that's what proper men do. That's what strength looks like. He shrugged gently. But now, I think I'm ready to learn how to receive. Am glanced around the apartment, still tidy, still exact. But on the shelf for the first time sat a new photograph. Marcus and his youngest daughter sitting together on a park bench, his silver hair slightly tousled by the wind. It wasn't posed. It wasn't polished. It was just a father laughing. Marcus said softly, I called her this morning. Told her I feel empty, and I don't know how to say this the right way, but I think I've been good for too long, so long that I forgot how to be honest. He looked at Am. She didn't hang up. He smiled. She just said, I know, and I've been waiting for you to say that for a very long time. We often fear we'll be rejected if we lower our guard, but sometimes it's the armor itself that keeps people from getting close. As Marcus walked Am to the door, he said something quiet, almost like a benediction. Thank you for not trying to fix me. Just being seen like this was enough. On the way home, Am reflected quietly. The cost of perfection isn't what it gives you, but what it quietly takes away, the real connections you lose along the way. Perfection had kept Marcus standing, but it had also left him standing alone. In Buddhism, there's a teaching called non-self. Not about denying who you are, but about releasing the constructed self, the image you perform, so you can live fully in the soft, compassionate truth of who you really are. Meditation says, love that asks for nothing in return is the deepest love of all. Christianity teaches, the righteous are not those who never fall, but those who rise again with a humble heart. Taoism reminds us, be like water, unassuming, unshowy, yet it nourishes everything it touches. And Marcus was learning to be water. No longer stone, no longer held in rigid shape. Just flowing, just being, just loved as is.